It was supposed to be just another Sunday. The kind of Sunday no one remembers. The kind that slips by with the smell of cut grass, fading sunlight, and background laughter. In the quiet town of Washougal, Washington, tucked between pine forests and the slow bends of the Columbia River, the weekend was winding down. Sprinklers ticked across lawns. A dog barked somewhere in the distance. The air smelled like barbecue smoke and pavement still warm from the day. Inside a modest, pine-shadowed house on the eastern edge of town, 3 little girls sat cross-legged on the living room floor, watching cartoons. Ellie, the oldest, was 7. Ava was 5. Grace, barely 2, held onto a tattered stuffed bunny with no ears left. Their socks didn't match. Their hair was messy. The room smelled like microwave popcorn and crayons. On the TV, cartoon characters bounced across the screen, voices high and silly. But the girls weren't the only ones in the room. Travis Decker sat across from them, elbows on his knees, hands locked together so tightly his knuckles turned white. He didn't blink much. He wasn't watching the cartoon. He was watching them, not with the warmth of a father enjoying a rare moment of peace, but with something else, something unreadable, cold, distant, as if he wasn't really seeing them at all, or perhaps seeing them for the last time. To an outsider, it might have looked like a perfectly normal scene. A divorced father spending court-approved time with his daughters. Nothing unusual, just a man reconnecting with his children after months of legal battles. But something had shifted, something underneath. Melanie, Travis's ex-wife, had been hesitant about the visit. She had fought through a bitter, draining custody battle just to protect the girls. She hadn't wanted to say yes, but Travis had pleaded. Just one full day, he said. Just me and them. One peaceful Sunday. I need this. She gave in. She would never stop regretting it. Travis hadn't been the same since the divorce. Not even close. Friends noticed it first. He stopped working, stopped calling people back, let his once thriving small construction business fall apart. He became obsessed with the court system, convinced it had conspired against him. He'd talk about judges, legal corruption, and fathers being erased, over and over. Before, he had been steady, dependable, a builder, literal and metaphorical, of homes, playsets, routines. He wasn't loud or angry. He was the kind of dad who made pancakes with faces on them, who took Ellie to gymnastics, Ava to the park, who tucked Grace in with lullabies he never admitted he sang. But that man was gone, and something darker had begun to take root in the shell he left behind. The signs were there. People would later say that. The bitterness, the obsession, the way he talked about being erased, but nothing that screamed danger. Nothing you'd arrest someone for. Nothing that would have warned Melanie that this Sunday would be the last time she'd ever hear from her daughters again. In the weeks leading up to the visit, Travis's internet searches told a story no one saw in time. How to disappear without a trace. Fastest way to die without pain. Can a father lose all rights? What happens if a father kills his kids? They weren't just words. They were breadcrumbs leading directly into the abyss. But on the surface, that Sunday seemed fine. That afternoon, Travis sent Melanie a photo. All 3 girls were smiling. Ava held the bunny. Ellie's arm was around her baby sister. Behind them, a paper drawing hung crooked on the wall. Stick figures in front of a house. Smoke curling from the chimney. 5 smiling faces, Mom, Dad, and the girls. The caption under the photo read, "Thanks for letting me have them today. They're beautiful." Melanie replied with a heart emoji. She didn't know it was goodbye. That evening, when the sun began to dip and the shadows lengthened outside her kitchen window, Melanie looked at the time. The girls were supposed to be home. She texted Travis. No reply. Called. Straight to voicemail. Tried again. Nothing. At first, she told herself not to panic. Maybe they were watching a movie. Maybe they'd fallen asleep. Maybe Travis had lost track of time. But when the streetlights came on and the sky turned black, something inside her shifted. Her fingers went cold. Her legs wouldn't sit still. She called again. No answer. Then she got in the car. Travis's house was dark when she pulled up. No porch light. No movement. The front door was locked. She knocked, then banged, then screamed. Nothing. It was like the house had swallowed itself. She called 911. When officers arrived and forced entry, They found a home that was still. Too still. No signs of violence. No broken glass. The girls' pajamas were folded neatly on the couch. Their small backpacks were lined up beside the door, zipped and ready. Their toothbrushes were dry. Their shoes by the door. In the kitchen, a single sheet of paper rested on the counter. One sentence, handwritten. "This world is broken. I did what I had to do. Don't look for us." Travis Decker and all 3 girls were gone. What followed was chaos. Amber alerts, police checkpoints, helicopters, search dogs, dive teams in the Columbia River, forest rangers scouring trails, troopers on rural highways, news anchors calling it a family vanishing. Every hour that passed became a punch in the gut, but no signs surfaced. It was like they had never existed. Until 6 days later, a gas station near a lonely highway in southern Oregon reported something. A man had come through. Scruffy beard, ball cap pulled low, didn't speak much, paid in cash, bought gas and snacks. But the clerk noticed the kids, 3 little heads in the back seat of a red Dodge minivan. He said the man never made eye contact, just stared at the ground, quiet. He had a strange calm to him, the clerk said, like someone who was walking through a dream, or out of one. Surveillance footage confirmed it. Grainy, hard to see, but 3 small shapes moved in the back. By the time police arrived, the van was gone. Again, just like that, vanished. But this time, the silence left behind was different. This time, it whispered one terrifying truth. He's still out there, and he's not alone. For a brief moment, it felt like hope was real again. The grainy gas station footage, just a few seconds of shaky black and white video, was the first concrete proof in days. A red Dodge minivan, a man with a beard and a ball cap, head down. 3 small heads faintly visible in the rear seat. It wasn't clear. It wasn't enough to charge him. But it was something. It was real. The gas station attendant had remembered the way the man acted. Quiet, careful, like he was afraid the ground beneath him might crack open. He never made eye contact. His answers were clipped, almost rehearsed. Paid in cash. Didn't linger. But what stuck with the attendant, what made him pick up the phone after seeing the Amber Alert on the news, was the way the man stood between the van and the convenience store door, shielding it, protecting it, like he didn't want anyone to see inside. And those shapes, 3, moving, small. Law enforcement swarmed the area within hours. Roadblocks, patrol cars, helicopters circling treetops, canvassing every motel, back road, hiking trail, and river route. They searched cabins, talked to every clerk, every gas station employee, every roadside vendor. But the van had vanished. Again, like smoke. But Travis wasn't that kind of runner. He was something else entirely. He was methodical. That was the word the FBI used when they stepped into the case, methodical. Not desperate, not emotional, not panicked, planned. That changed everything. They began reviewing everything. Old interviews, social media, cell phone records, GPS pings. And what they found painted a picture of a man who hadn't just broken. He'd prepared. In the weeks before the abduction, Travis had cleaned out his savings. Nearly $8,000. Sold power tools, pawned his old generator, bought camping gear, gas cans, dried food, a small water purifier, children's thermal clothes, sizes just right for Ellie, Ava, and Grace. He had even withdrawn small amounts from ATMs over several days, never more than a few hundred at a time, to avoid detection. This wasn't the act of a man who snapped. It was the act of a man with a plan. The investigators knew it. Melanie knew it. And that made it worse. Because it meant he had time. Time to set traps. Time to pick routes. Time to think. It meant he had help, maybe, or at least knowledge, about backwoods roads, state park blind spots, maybe even access to fake documents. That part was still unknown. But one thing was clear. Travis Decker didn't disappear by accident. And if the girls were with him, if they were still alive, he had taken them with a chilling kind of purpose. Melanie tried not to drown in that thought. She had stopped doing interviews. She stayed out of the spotlight. But inside her home, she broke apart in slow motion. The girls' drawings still hung on the fridge. Their cereal bowls still sat in the cabinet. She couldn't bring herself to donate a single piece of their clothing. She kept their toothbrushes. She kept their shoes. She kept their scent on their bed sheets, afraid it might be the last thing that ever connected them. Each day, she waited for a miracle. Then, on day 32, the phone rang at the Vancouver Police Department. A Salvation Army store worker had found something strange. A burner phone inside a donation bin. Still powered on. No SIM card. Just one voicemail. He called it in. What the police found wasn't a confession. It wasn't even a voice. It was breathing, low, rhythmic, like someone was trying not to be heard. For 19 seconds, that was all there was. And then, just before it cut off, something else. A cough. Small, brief, fragile, like a child's. The audio was rushed to federal analysts. Filtered, amplified, compared. But it was inconclusive. Not proof, but not ignorable either. When Melanie heard it, just once she collapsed. She swore it was Grace. The FBI wouldn't confirm. Couldn't. But the energy shifted again. Search teams were redeployed across southwest Washington. Travis had grown up nearby. He knew the rivers, the old ranger trails, the logging roads. He had camped there as a boy, fished there as a teenager. If he was hiding, if he had prepared for survival, this was where he'd do it. For weeks, helicopters scanned forests. Dogs sniffed through thickets. Road cameras were reviewed. Backcountry cabins were raided. Search and rescue teams walked shoulder to shoulder through old-growth woods. They found nothing. The phone had no prints, no data, no digital fingerprint to trace. It was then that investigators turned deeper into Travis himself. Not as a fugitive, but as a psychology, a mind. They brought in behavioral analysts, survival experts, cult specialists, anyone who could profile what kind of man doesn't just vanish, but takes 3 children with him into oblivion. And the conclusion was chilling. Travis Decker hadn't done this in rage. He had done it in belief. He believed the system was against him, that the world had taken everything from him, that his daughters were going to be erased from his life. And he would not let that happen. So he erased everything else. The team combed through forums he had posted on under aliases, fathers' rights boards, anti-government threads, survivalist communities, rants about custody laws, conspiracies about CPS. He wrote about control, about freedom from the lie, about starting over. In one post, now archived and attributed to him, he wrote, "You can't save your children from a burning house by walking away. You go in and get them, and you don't come back out." It was dated 3 weeks before the disappearance. That quote became a haunting refrain, printed on whiteboards in FBI offices, used in trainings, whispered during team meetings. Because it wasn't just philosophy, it was a confession. And soon after, they found something else. A storage unit, registered under a fake name, paid in cash, rented 3 months before the abduction. Inside, agents found camping supplies, solar batteries, survival rations, children's gear still in packaging, topographic maps of forest regions across Washington and Oregon, detailed notes, routes marked in red, and a single book, How to Disappear and Never Be Found, dog-eared, highlighted, tabbed. They were close. Everyone felt it, but the unit had been cleared out weeks earlier. Whatever Travis had stashed there, he had already taken. He had moved on, vanished again, this time with precision, this time like a ghost walking between the raindrops. And somewhere out there, if that cough had been real, if that gas station footage had been true, if that drawing with smoke curling from the chimney still existed somewhere on a cabin wall, Travis Decker wasn't just gone. He was raising them. Time moved forward, but nothing else did. The trail went cold, then colder. The amber alerts came down from highway signs. Volunteers who had once filled parking lots with search maps and clipboards stopped showing up. Media coverage thinned, then disappeared. New stories took the spotlight. New tragedies took America's attention. But in a single house on a quiet Washougal Street, the clock never ticked again. Melanie stopped measuring time in days or months. For her, life became a loop, circling around the last voicemail, the last photo, the last normal Sunday. She didn't throw away her daughter's toothbrushes. She didn't remove their clothes from the closet. She kept their backpacks zipped, waiting by the door untouched. She couldn't sleep in their beds anymore. So she started sleeping in the hallway between them, just in case they came back. She couldn't stand the thought of missing it. Grief, she learned, wasn't an anchor. It didn't hold her in place. It was a fog, thick, creeping, and silent. It crept into her lungs, filled her chest, blurred every moment of every day. People told her to heal. But how do you heal from something that hasn't ended? The detectives called less often now. But one man didn't forget. Greg Stinson, the retired trucker who had reported the red van at the Idaho rest stop. He couldn't get the case out of his mind. He kept watching old clips, kept scanning rest stops with sharper eyes than before. And then, one night in late fall, he called again. This time, it wasn't a van. It was a face. Greg had been at a small camping store just outside Missoula, Montana, a place that barely showed up on GPS. He was browsing thermal socks when he saw a man. Older, thinner, wearing a hoodie and sunglasses, even indoors, paying in cash. But what stood out wasn't the face. It was what the man picked up. Children's socks, sizes for girls. He held them, stared, then put them down, didn't buy, and left. Greg followed him outside. But by the time he made it to the door, the man was gone. No license plate, no direction, just gone. The store had security footage, but only caught the back of the man's head. FBI agents arrived the next morning. They found nothing. No prints. No footage of the parking lot. Just one more ghost slipping through cracks in the world. But the report stirred something. The behavioral analysts had been right. Travis wasn't wandering. He was tracking something, a route, a system, a survival plan years in the making. And most terrifying of all, he was possibly raising the girls with him. Not in panic, not in motion, but in routine. Investigators began modeling his movement like a backcountry operation. Moving camp every few weeks, staying off-grid, using pre-buried supplies, filtering river water, cooking on camp stoves, homeschooling with torn books. It was possible, horribly possible. Melanie tried not to imagine it, but the worst pictures came at night. She saw Ellie, now 9, trying to teach Ava how to read in a dusty cabin lit by a propane lantern. She saw Grace being told that her mother didn't want her anymore, that she had left, that she was the reason they had to live in hiding, that her mother was the enemy. That pain was worse than death. She once told an FBI counselor, if he killed them, I could bury them. I could scream, mourn, build a grave. But this is like dying in reverse. Then winter came, and with it, one final flicker. A hunter deep in the Oregon backcountry stumbled on a strange, hidden shelter tucked behind a fallen ridge, nearly invisible. Torn tarps, rusted cans, burned firewood, and something in the dirt, small handprints. Tiny, frozen into the soil. He didn't have cell reception, so he waited until morning to report it. By the time rangers arrived, the site had been blanketed in snow. Another scream swallowed by distance. The FBI kept their eyes on Travis's known past. Old friends, family, co-workers, high school classmates, contractors he'd worked with. Nothing. No contact. No mistakes. It was like he had stepped outside of the world. Even the behavioral profilers began to admit they had no active leads left. Then, 2 years after the girls disappeared, something surfaced. Not in Washington, not in Oregon, in British Columbia. A teenage boy, hiking near his family's remote cabin, stumbled on an abandoned shelter. Primitive, old but not ancient. Inside, canned food, a child's shoe, and something else. A newspaper clipping, water-stained, folded, torn, but partially readable. It was about the Decker case. Authorities rushed in. The shelter had no fingerprints, no bodies, no names, no photos, no direct connection. But someone had been there. Someone had carried that story with them. Someone who wanted to remember. Canadian law enforcement cooperated. Search teams scanned the area. Volunteers combed through the trees. Helicopters buzzed overhead. Hope searched. And then, again, the trail ended. No van, no fire pits, no girls, no Travis, just trees, just silence, just that old question again. Where would a man go when he believes the world already took everything from him? Spring returned, but it didn't bring answers. The snow thawed. The forest bloomed again. Rivers ran faster with meltwater. But the earth gave up no secrets, no van, no clothes, no bodies. The search teams walked the same trails, scanned the same woods, asking the same question. Where'd he go? The case was still open. The FBI still had files on their desks. A court board filled with photos, maps, red thread that looped across western states like veins. But most agents had been reassigned. The calls came less often. The briefings grew shorter. But Melanie never left. She stayed in the same house. The same kitchen where she'd read that last text. The same hallway where she used to sleep between her daughter's doors. Nothing had changed. The rooms were still as they were. Pajamas still folded. Drawings still taped to the walls. Hairbrushes, shoes, lunchboxes. She had once said, "If I change anything, they won't recognize it when they come back." But over time, the silence hardened. Not into peace, into something heavier. The grief stopped tearing her apart. It settled instead. An ache that never healed, never exploded, just pulsed quietly behind her ribs. The world kept moving. Other cases made headlines. Other names flashed on TV. Other parents cried in front of microphones. But her story, their story, had slipped from the public eye until the sighting in Wyoming. A bus station sighting. A man holding a child's hand. Cameras too blurry. No confirmation. Then Montana. A receipt left behind with the name Decker. But no fingerprint. Just an echo. Travis had become a phantom stitched into the edges of small towns. A name people whispered at gas stations, hiker forums, and ranger cabins. But never long enough to be caught. The profiles grew darker. The FBI's criminal psychologists began shifting their theory. At first, they believed he would make a mistake, that he'd break, that guilt would spill over. But he didn't, because they now believed he didn't feel guilt. He believed he saved them. Some believed the girls had died within the first few days. A tragic murder-suicide hidden in some gorge the world had forgotten. Others believed the opposite, that they were alive, being raised under different names, homeschooled in the wilderness, moved every few weeks like shadows in the trees. One theory suggested they were living in an off-grid religious commune, where outsiders weren't questioned and silence was sacred. Another theory, stranger but chilling, suggested Travis had trained them to avoid cameras, fake names, and even respond to different birth dates. Melanie didn't know which version was worse. The one where they were gone, or the one where they were alive, but lost in a lie so deep it could take decades to unwind. The reward increased to $20,000. The missing posters were redesigned. Updated age progression photos were released. But most people had stopped looking, except Melanie. Every year on the anniversary, she stood in front of her house, holding the same 3 photos. Ellie with her missing front tooth, Ava with her favorite pink boots, Grace small, wide-eyed, with that earless stuffed bunny. And every year, she said the same sentence. "If you can hear this, Mommy is still looking for you." That clip never went viral again, but she still said it. Because maybe, just maybe, they would hear her. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but one day, some still believe there's a third possibility. That a girl will one day walk into a small-town police station. She'll be 19 or 20. She won't know why the name Melanie makes her stomach twist. She'll say she doesn't remember much from before the woods. She'll carry a drawing, one with a house, smoke curling from the chimney, 3 little girls, 2 parents, and a son in the corner, smiling. And that, finally, will be the moment the silence breaks. Until then, the story stays open. A vanishing act so precise, so cruel, and so impossible that it still echoes through every forgotten trail, every gas station window, every mother's nightmare that ends in a scream. 3 little girls, 1 broken man, and a silence that still hasn't answered back.